Hey, what's up everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today we will continue where we left off in the last tutorial where I showed you how to create snow or an ice shader, and we got results similar to this one. And thanks again for mentioning me in your renders. They look very good and I like that you show me what you did. I really appreciate that. Before we continue, I want to show you what we will be creating in this tutorial. So this will be a two-part lighting tutorial where as you can see, I'm using this kind of the same ice shader. I created a bit more environments for this. It's an Igloo, as if you did not see that. I will actually give you the whole scene, all the assets, all the props, all the lights, because I did not use any board plugins or board models. I this time literally did it all by hand. That's why I will give you access to all this stuff if you have the reward tier on Patreon, where you have access to all the source files, which means you will get the Houdini scene, you got the Maya scene, with all the shaders, all the lights, all the effects used, everything will be for you available. So before we jump into Maya, I was not sure how do you create an Igloo, right? And I thought, yeah, just stack up ice, or from snow create little ice cubes and then stack them up. But there's actually some trickery behind this. So I did some research first. So this is actually how you build an Igloo. You start on like a skew angle and then you stack them up and then you rotate around it. And in the end you have a finished hemisphere of ice or snow. And this is actually how I did it in Maya as well. I will not show you I will not recreate this now in this tutorial because it will be very slow and time consuming, but I will show you like step by step kind of what I did here. So what I first did was create a sphere with a proper radius. So this is 150 centimeters high. It might be a bit smaller than it is in real life. I'm not 100% sure, but a grown-up and adult could like kind of be in there. When he's sitting down, he would sit comfortably in this area, I guess. So in this part 1 tutorial, I will just show you the setup, how I did everything, how I did the stuff I did in Houdini, and I export Alemix from Houdini back to Maya, and this will be part 1, and part 2 will be how to create all this lighting and the shading stuff in Maya. So let's start with setting the whole thing up. So I have, this is the Igloo top group, and this is my reference sphere. So what I actually did, I created cube by cube, as I just said. So let's just unhide the Igloo here and hide the reference as well. So you can see it's very primitive blocks, just like this. And I actually started off with this cube, so I just modeled it a bit skew, and it's like has a bit slanted edges. And then I think I started, did I start here? Yeah, I must have started somewhere around here. So this was my first brick I placed, which is kind of this guy here. And then I moved around, and then the next layer, and then stacked them up, right? So it was a bit of a pain. Like it took me, I guess, 2 hours to do this. So position 1, duplicated it, rotated it, and then occasionally I had to readjust the vertices. So it was a bit of tedious process to get a kind of realistic Igloo. And what I did as well was I made these bigger gaps. Obviously, when you do it for real, you want to close all these gaps. But I deliberately added them in, so we get actually this nice bleeding light effect, which you can see here. And some might think that this looks like too scattery, like there's too much light bleeding through. But then I checked lots of references, and they are really they scatter a lot actually. So look at this one here. It's obviously longer exposure. And I guess I have a pretty bright light inside, but it's very translucent. And then what else we have? Yeah, these ones. This I think was kind of a reference for what I was using. And you can actually see it's looking really sweet with all the light bleeding through, and you can see it's like brighter at the top and then it's fading out. But then again, like I was just trying to kind of achieve the result. I was not really trying to do photorealistic stuff. First of all, you wouldn't see, I guess, the sun here and then the moonlight or whatever this is. So this was more like a test to see all this, the lighting, and adding some nice rim lights and all that stuff. Anyway, so this was my first result when I was positioning all the cubes and boxes and stuff. And then I created the door like this. So this is the same approach. I just extracted these cubes and I split these two guys up just to make them a bit more interesting. And then you can see I've got this brick wall here. And the cool thing is in Houdini you have way more flexibility to model, or let's say to adjust whatever you modeled beforehand. So, and then I created this Boolean object, which will be a cutter object in Houdini. So I can use this guy to subtract geometry from the Igloo itself. So this was my first approach, right? So it's actually pretty straightforward. I'm not sure if this is the best way of doing things, but it worked out for me. And you can see that this here does not actually resemble what has been rendered out. And in the render you can see that it's actually like molten and broken up, and there's some holes in here and then they merge together and all that stuff. So all this was done in Houdini. It's actually, I was always scared of Houdini because like it's the big FX tool, and I'm slowly getting the hang of it. It's very powerful, and I guess a few of you guys are Houdini artists, and you might laugh of what I did. This was actually my first project in Houdini, and for that I must say it worked out pretty good, better than I expected, to be honest. Yeah, so I moved all these boxes, blah blah, and then I selected all these objects. Like I think the door is separate, the Boolean separate, and the Igloo separate, and I just went to cache, Alembic, export selection to Alembic. And this was that on the Maya side. So now let's head over to Houdini. And I actually have two monitors, so my node grab is actually in the other monitor. So this is now a bit more squashed, so you can see everything in this view. And so it's like Houdini is very like lots of options. I just maybe know a 0.5% of what you can actually do in here, but anyways, so I have my Alembic inputs. So if I look at this Alembic 5 input, you can see that this is my Maya object, which I exported from Maya, and then I have the rest. So I've got the door here, and then I have this cutter object. So, and this is my tree, and at the bottom, yeah, I'll show you. I'll just go through and then you can see what I did here. And I will explain each of these steps just to help you guys understand what I'm doing here. So this is not a typical tutorial where I be doing it for you. Like I'm just showing you what I did here. So the first thing what I did was convert the polys into VDB, like a volume object. So now it has actually a voxels instead of points. This will help me to do these Boolean effects and do these melted look. So in the VDB you have the option to define the voxel size. So it depends on your scene scale. The voxels is kind of the quality. So the lower you make the voxel size, the higher detail you get in the conversion from points to voxels. And I did that for all three things. So for this guy as well. But I first scaled this one. So I moved it, scaled it a bit, made it bigger, and I copied the same transform to the door, to the Boolean object as well. So this is the same transform. And then again, I converted them to VDBs, same here. And the cool thing is with VDBs, you can treat them as one big voxel box, and you can subtract, you can add, you can merge, you can intersect all these voxel types separately. So this is what I actually did here. So I have this Boolean object and I have the Igloo, And in the options here, I can choose SDF difference, which is kind of a Boolean operation. And then you can see it actually just cuts out the hole for the door. So this is the VDB, this is the door, and then I just subtract this from the middle one, and then I get this cutout. And then for the door itself, I'm just using a union, which is just combining those together, and then I'm just adding this one on top. And you can see currently the intersections are very hard. There's no soft fall off or anything like that. So the next step would be to smooth the VDBs. And smoothing actually blends those voxels together to create a more interesting shape, like this. So this would be now the VDB smooth. And you can see it blends those edges nicely together, and from the inside you can see it fills all the holes which were there previously. And I can show you exactly what it does. I'll just copy this one, and then I can show you from this one. So the filter voxel radius is kind of the initial strength of it. So you can see, like, if I increase the filter voxel radius, it eats up more voxels and makes them smoother. And then iterations is kind of the intensity. So the more you iterate over it, the softer it gets, and the more the blending happens. And you can switch, and you can see what's happening here. And yeah, you can see it's getting nice and round, and it totally is up to you if you want to go for this look or the other look. But this gives you the flexibility to kind of soften your object. So this is now what I ended up using for the tutorial. So, and you can see that a lot of stuff happens before, and then I smooth this guy, and then I merge them together. So what I'm doing here, actually, I'm going from the combined VDB, and I do the same smoothing again from this side, and I'm converting this to polygons then. And after that, I am actually adding some noise for this. So I'm actually breaking up the surface. So first converting it to polys, and then I'm distorting the points, which gives me this nice surfacey distorted look. And then I'm using this measure, and the measure attribute or type is curvature. And it adds an attribute to your polygons depending on how close they are to each other. And then when I'm doing that to get points which are close together, like especially in the ridges and wherever like two surfaces are close together. And then I'm using this to scatter points, and this looks like this. So I'm using the curvature to get objects or points which are close together, and then I'm creating points in that location. And you can kind of see where lots of points are there is like the surfaces are close together. And if I rotate, you can actually see the Igloo, and you can see all the close edges and ridges. So I'm using that to scatter objects into those ridges. So I have a simple sphere like this, and I'm using the mountain, which is like distortion, like it offsets the points, and I'm creating this shape with that. Something random. You can control all this stuff in here, how detailed you want to have it. It's up to you. And then I'm using the copy to points. So I'm using this object, and I'm copying this to all these points here. And then it looks like this. So I'm not so familiar, as you know. So what I would love to do is actually give them random rotation, random noise, and a random scale. But I couldn't do it. I did not know how, so I just skipped this part. But what I did to kind of give me that result, I was scattering more points than I wanted to, and then I used them to merge them together again. So I'm converting those all these objects to VDBs again, and you can see because I scattered so many of them, you get these lines of objects and these blobs. And then I'm using the smooth operation again, and then I'm combining this. Using the smooth, you get these random shapes, like longer, thicker blobs like that. So now we are back at this where I started from, and you can see that I have this and now I have this object. So my first idea was to add stuff on top of that, but then I tried it out and I thought it might actually be nice if you get these holes in it. So then what I was doing, I was doing a negative, so I was using the difference. And now I got these nice interesting edges everywhere, and I can show you the other thing. If I would use union, they would be added on top, and it looks a bit weird, honestly. So yeah, I thought it's better if I use difference, and then I get these nice like chipped off edges, kind of like it has been there a while, the Igloo, and then it started melting, and it got overnight it freezes up again, and then you get these cracks and something is brittle, and these edges appear. And from there on, I was creating, I was smoothing it out again, kind of just to get a bit softer edges around this. And then I was converting the VDB back to a poly, like this. And I'm using the adaptive mode, I think. Oh, it's actually, the default is adaptive, so where there's more detail, you get more subdivisions, which is nice. This is what I wanted. And from here on, I was using, again, this mountain operation just to break up the surface, which kinds of like bulges things out, and you can see what I'm doing here. So that's the difference. And you can kind of play around with what you want to do and different heights, whatever. So I found something which I liked and I exported that. So I created this ROP node, alembic output, and then in here you still specify your output path, and then you just render that out. And all these other nodes, you can create them if you press tab, and then you just type VDB smooth or whatever you need, and then it's being created. Yeah, and these things were my tests. So I was, like, as I said, this was my first time using Houdini. And yeah, so I did a few tests. And this one is the ground, I think. Yeah, so let me just, I changed the name. So let me just write it back. And as you can see in the render, there's also a, oh, is it not scattering and lighting? Lighting and scattering, I guess. Okay, so now I also have this ground here, and you can see it's like I did a few things in Maya, and then I exported the alembic because I had some issues with in Maya actually. So in here, I don't have, do I have the original ground? No. So this is the alembic ground. So I was looking through the camera at first, and I was just trying to make the ground more interesting. So at first I just had a plane like this, and obviously that is not very appealing and interesting. So I think I subdivided kind of by 10, like 100 or something. No, it was definitely more. It's around 50. Yeah, something like this. So and I've seen a few igloos, and there's sometimes there's like a they have this little ridge before in front of the door, like a little intersection or something which goes deeper, so it's more below the ground. So what I did, I was using the sculpt tool, changing the radius of the brush, and I was just adding like these little details here, something like this, right? And then I was looking through the render camera, which is this one, and I was actually tearing this guy off. So I have it here. And then I was in perspective, and then I was actually doing the paint stuff. So I was adding mountains or little higher parts in here. Just something more interesting than a flat plane. And you can see it already, it looks a lot better when you just add a bit more detail to your backgrounds or foregrounds, whatever. Where are we? Here. So this is kind of what I did, and the problem was when I was doing this approach, I'm not sure why exactly, but my displacements kind of broke, like, and even my bump map. So I think it had something to do with normals, but then I tried to restore them, but I couldn't really get it to work. So what I ended up doing in the end, I was selecting the ground and I was exporting this as an alembic. And in Houdini, I did not do much. Like, this is my initial first ground, and then I added a few more as it was going on in the tutorial. I noticed I need a deeper background, so I was just copying these planes and making them bigger. So what I ended up doing was I imported the original mesh, which is this one from Maya, and then I was just remeshing it, which added a bit more subdivisions. I think I triangulated it, yeah, like this, and then I exported it back out. So I did not do anything crazy, but this ended up fixing the problem, so I could use proper displacements again in Maya. But you can already see, just by doing this quick paint up, you can see that it's way more interesting now, and it's more appealing. You can see the igloo is now kind of on the hill, looking downwards to something, and I think in the render I kind of actually missed that I wanted to add this ridge in here. So, which I have now on, which I actually totally forgot to do. Oops, not as high. Yeah, so something like this. Just do it. So it asked me to subdivide, so I just said yes, do it. And now we actually have this ridge, and now it's actually a lot better now. And yeah, so this is the first igloo, and what I ended up doing, that I imported it in here. So let's just hide my reference of my space geometry. And this is my first igloo. So this is how it looks inside of Maya if I disable the wireframe default shaders. So this is now what it looks like without a displacement map on top. This is my original exported mesh from Houdini. It's not the original ground because that's the one I just kind of modeled or sculpted. But this one is the ground I ended up using. You can see I'm missing. Maybe I'll just use this one instead. We'll see how good this one works. So this would be the first part of this tutorial where I went to Houdini, generated converted the cubes into VDBs, and then merged them together to create this to create a unified object with a door. And from then on, I started adding these smooth objects here, and then these little spheres everywhere, which I then converted to polys and smoothed them out. And then I subtracted this from the main igloo to get these cracks and holes. And then I converted all this into polygons again and smoothed them out and added this little noise on top. So this is what the noise is doing. It's just bulging out the edges, and I don't know, it's like expanding it a bit. And this is the first part of this tutorial. In the second one, we will be doing the lighting and shading. And again, you will have access to the scene file, the Houdini file, the Maya file. So be sure to have this Patreon source materials reward, so you get access to all that stuff. Thank you guys for tuning in, and I see you in the next part, which is part 2. Thank you guys for tuning in.